This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. Another hour show on tap for you. Hope everyone had a great night last night. Sixers won, so it must have been a good night for you out there, if you're a Sixers fan at least. 609-403-0973 is the text board, of course, to get in on the conversation. We got Dave Weinberg joining us a day early this week because this Eagles stuff is just constantly going. There's constantly stuff going on. So we got to get into some of this stuff with the Eagles. And, of course, we take your texts as well, 609-403-0973. And part of the issue with the Eagles is not just the Eagles, because, of course, you can see the news on 97.3 ESPN.com, the AP report. Oh, Wentz needs more time to think about it. He doesn't know if he wants a divorce, right? And I'm watching the Sixers game last night. And part of me is like, I'm just enjoying it. I'm enjoying the fact that you got, Danny Green hitting shots after everybody said that he was a bum. You got, guys like Dwight Howard going out there, getting all those rebounds, 13 rebounds in 17 minutes. You got Tyrese Maxey charging up and down the court, having a good time. But then as the hours proceed after the game, the first thing that comes to my mind is, let me get this straight. The 76ers said that we have a problem, and they went and fixed it. Have the Eagles even admitted they really have a problem? Really? Look what the 76ers did. Things went completely sideways in the bubble. Ben Simmons gets injured, and it was like the whole team just couldn't do anything. Tobias Harris was playing his tail off. He tried to go back out there. Remember, he tried to play concussed, smacked his head on the ground. Remember that? Joel Embiid he didn't want to be down there. The players even said themselves, we didn't want to be there. We had no interest. All right? So what did the organization do? They said, we have to make changes. They got a new head coach. They changed the front office. Now, I don't expect the Sixers to go 60-12 the rest of the year, but I do expect them to have a really good season. And part of that is what you're seeing right now. The team is interested in being out there. The team is interested in going out there and putting their best foot forward. I think that when you look at the Eagles, I have to wonder, is there anybody actually admitting there's a problem in the Eagles organization? You listen to Doug Peterson, Howie Roseman yesterday, and based on what they're saying, well, it was a rough year, but we still have faith and confidence and belief and all that flowery stuff. Okay, that's great. You got belief and faith and hope, and none of that's going to take care of anything. Hope, faith, and belief doesn't win you football games. The Sixers said, we need to make changes. There's a problem here, and here's what we're going to do. Apparently, the Eagles are still evaluating and figuring out what the next step is. And that's a bit of a problem. See, at no point this year did Carson Wentz ever get up there and say, I did X, Y, or Z wrong, and that's not good enough. And I got to be better. Now, Carson Wentz told you himself, remember? Carson Wentz said, I got to keep doing what I'm doing. He's the one who said, I got to keep going out there and playing my game, and I got to elevate my teammates. Carson Wentz never admitted he had a problem. Doug Peterson says, I got to do a better job. What do you got to do a better job at, Doug? Doug, what about your play calling? Well, I love play calling. Okay, Doug, but what about the play calls that didn't go so well? Well, I got to self-evaluate. All right, Doug, you got to self-evaluate. Great. Is anybody helping you with that self-evaluation? Because you self-evaluating doesn't seem to be doing enough right now. Well, the Eagles today had Jeffrey Lurie and Doug Peterson meeting together. Is there going to be any honest, raw conversation during that meeting, or is it just going to be, we're not going to act like half stuff that happened this year didn't happen, we're just going to move forward? I mean that in all sincerity, because I look at this Eagles team compared to the Sixers last night. I see one organization that said, we keep trying to do the same thing and we keep trying to expect a different result. We got to make changes. We have an Eagles team that has gone throughout this entire season and has not admitted that what they're doing is not working, except for one time when they benched Wentz and brought in Hurts. And even then, it was kind of like a passive, an indirect, a non-specific, well, we need a spark, is what Doug said. Remember that? I was looking for a spark for the offense. Not that Carson Wentz keeps turning the ball over. Not that the offenses look sluggish. Not that, maybe some of the play calls are just not working. Not that Carson Wentz optioned out of almost every play sent into the huddle. Not that there's been all these injuries on the offense and that this team is just decimated and they're doing their best with what they have. None of that. We need a spark. And then when they bring Nate Sudfeld in, the organization has complete blissful ignorance to perception outside the building. They could care less what you think, what I think, what anybody thinks. They just get up there and they say, well, we wanted to get Nate Sudfeld some snaps. Doug, this ain't the preseason. If you want to get Sudfeld snaps, why didn't you just start him? No answer. Nobody knows. Carson Wentz declines to speak to the media. Bad optics. Report comes out the next day. Wentz needs time to think about future in Philadelphia. How much time you need, Carson? You've been sitting on the bench for 4 weeks now? It's like everyone in this organization just doesn't get it. And that's what's scary. Because if the 76ers were able to figure it out, you think the Eagles can't figure it out? At some point, these people, whoever it is, whether it's specifically Doug and Howie or whether it's whoever's advising them, someone needs to have an honest conversation about, guys, it doesn't matter what the reason was for Nate Sudfeld coming in the game. It doesn't matter that you think you're trying to do the right thing. There's a perception issue going on here where everyone thinks that you're doing these things for completely alternative motive reasons. Your own player goes on a Philadelphia sports station and says that the guys weren't happy when you brought in Nate Sudfeld. Well, what are you doing with that guy? You going to have a conversation with Miles Sanders? You going to talk to him about it? Or is Doug Peterson just going to say what he said about Carson Wentz and said, I haven't talked about the report? I thought Hunter Brody brought up a great point on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill earlier. That when the Ben Simmons, James Harden rumors ramped up before Christmas, Daryl Morey went on Twitter and Doc Rivers got Ben Simmons on the phone. Now, in most people's minds, they don't owe Ben Simmons anything. But in Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers' minds, they believed that they owed to Ben Simmons to clarify it, and they owed it to the fan base to clarify the situation. That's the Sixers. The Eagles, deny, act like it doesn't exist, deny, act like it doesn't exist, rinse and repeat. That's the Philadelphia Eagles this year. And I don't even know who to blame. I don't know who to blame anymore. The only person I can blame anymore is the owner. At some point, the owner needs to speak to us. The owner owes it to the fan base and to the media covering this team an explanation for this past year. Because As Scott Grayson said on the Sports Bash earlier with Mike Harvey, there's no media in the locker room. There's no media hanging in the NovaCare Center every day. There's limited access because of these COVID protocols. You're not getting the same level of coverage and access and information that you typically would during an Eagles season, during an NFL season. We're not getting information from the typical places. We're not getting reporting in the same manner. So as Scott Grayson said, he's not in the locker room to see people's body language. I remember there was a report about Lane Johnson last year. And the only reason the report came out about Lane Johnson and him having an injury was because he was limping around the locker room after coming out of the shower. And when he saw the media, he limped back out of the room. Okay. So if that's the kind of reporting we got when people were in the locker room, imagine how much information we're missing out on. Because it's pretty obvious there's something going unsaid here. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. As I mentioned earlier, Dave Weinberg will join us coming up at 6:20 tonight to get more into the Eagles. He's covered the Eagles since the mid-'90s, so he's seen the entire Jeffrey Lurie history of owning this team. We'll get his perspective on the Eagles, on Lurie, on Doug Peterson, and more. 609-403-0973 on the text board, 609-403-0973. Texter says, I don't think the Eagles planned to tank the game. Once Doug made the bogus fourth down call, he needed to cover his rear and took Hurts out and says our plan was to lose. Doug's been terrible all year at making fourth down calls. The start of the game, 2-point conversions, all that cute stuff worked on the Super Bowl run, but if you find $20 on the floor once, you might not find it every week. Couple things, Texter. One, that may be true. Maybe the plan was never to tank in the first place. But there are multiple reports out there that Doug seriously talked about playing Nate Sudfeld. So if the media knew about it and other people knew about it, then maybe either Doug just didn't communicate well enough, or maybe there was little information that was not articulated properly. And considering Doug is not the greatest orator and information disseminator out there, that's completely possible. But I don't know if I agree with this idea that Doug's been terrible all year at making fourth down calls, because it was more than just Super Bowl year. Doug has always been hyper aggressive on fourth down. He's always been this risk taker. He's always been this guy who's pushed the envelope. So I would argue that for Doug, he was making these decisions for the 4 years before this year. He did in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. In fact, I remember being here with Mike Gill on the Sports Bash from 97.3 ESPN, all the Eagle fans who were ripping Doug, who went for it for the 2-point conversion versus the Ravens in 2016, and all these people who were saying, you could have gone to overtime, what is he doing? And Doug's explanation was, I was trying to win the game. And people didn't like his explanation. So this is what he's been the whole time. I don't think this is he ran out of luck. I don't think it's just cute stuff that worked on Super Bowl run. I think this is who he is. For better or for worse, this is who he is. 609-403-0973 on the text board. Dan EHT chimes in, says injuries were on a historic level with the Eagles. They will have an easier schedule next year. I'm not as worried as most. 13 different offensive line rotations. Actually, it's 14, so you missed one. I can't blame you for missing one, Dan, because there were so many changes in the offensive line this year, you lost track. We all did. I actually forgot for a little bit that Matt Pryor played left guard at one point. Dan from EHT goes on to say, both starting wide receivers are out most of the year. Your best guard is out for the year. Starting left tackle is out for the year. Ertz missed numerous games. These injuries run a whole nother world bad. You're right. And I think that's part of what gets overlooked. And it's not an excuse, but it's part of reality. And part of reality is the Philadelphia Eagles were so injured that they never recovered. The problem is that it just never got better until Jalen Hurts came in there was about 2 games where you had some hope, and then all hopes were dashed and went away. We'll get to you more your texts throughout the show, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. On the text board, Dave Weinberg, longtime veteran Eagles writer, covered the team since the 1990s. We'll get with him coming up next to find out what he thinks about the Eagles moving forward here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
We'll be back to your text in just a bit at 609-403-0973. Begin the conversation. Dave Weinberg covered the Eagles the entire Jeffrey Lurie era. Will join us now coming up on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. A day early. We usually do Dave on Wednesdays for Weinberg Wednesday. But, Dave, there's so much going on with the Eagles right now that I couldn't wait until tomorrow to have this conversation. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I just put on my tank top, so I'm all ready to go.
Well, I hope that you're ready to go because I feel like the last 72 hours have been such a whirlwind, from the reports over the weekend about Jim Schwartz, then Doug Peterson reports, then Wentz reports, and then there was that game, and then there's the aftermath of the game, and it just feels like from Saturday morning to this afternoon, it feels like it's just become this avalanche when it comes to the Eagles that's gotten completely out of control.
Yeah, I guess maybe people just are afraid that the season's ending, which it is for the Eagles. So they just gotta try and keep things, on the forefront as much as they can. But yeah, you're right. It's really been an interesting couple of days, to say the least. Starting, like you said, when Jim Schwartz announced he's taking a year off, and then all the aftermath and stuff with Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts in the game, and did they tank? Did they not? Did the players want them to play? Did they not? It's been an interesting couple of days for sure.
Now, I want to start with the aftermath of yesterday, which was Doug and Howie at a press conference yesterday.
Uh-huh.
And then Doug at a press conference after the game on Sunday night. And for whatever reason, this organization won't acknowledge any reports. They won't acknowledge perception outside the building. It's like they're trying to act like nothing exists except for the narrative that they want to give out. And I feel like, are they really that oblivious and naive that there's nothing, there's no other opinion, there's no other perspective on their situation except their own?
It's kind of always been that way with them. They want to control the narrative. They want to determine what people get out of them. You'll never hear them admit, you'll never hear them confirm any reports, negative or positive, really. They just they want to tell you what they want to tell you when they want to tell you. And they will not, they won't waver from that. They never have.
Now, if they won't waver from that, then Dave, how do we read the situation when we don't have reporters in the locker room like we've had in the past? We don't have people able to go in the building. These guys who are covering the team, people who are trying to report, they can't even do it the original way. So how are we supposed to measure the information the Eagles are giving us when they won't even acknowledge anything anybody else is saying but their own?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation. Like you said, with no locker room access, that takes away a big part of what a beat writer's job is. I mean, just speaking from personal experience, that's where I got, I would tend to not blow them off, but I would tend to not really pay really close attention to press conferences. I always got the better information, the better stories from talking to players one-on-one in the locker room, after practice, after games, what have you. And that being taken away, you just have to rely on the video conferences and the Zoom calls and all that stuff. And those are very carefully controlled, it seems to me. And it's made it a lot tougher for writers to do their job.
Now, you mentioned about the locker room. I remember last year, for example, there was a situation where a player, I think it was Lane Johnson, when he first got injured last year, he started limping around the locker room. When he saw the media in the locker room, he limped out of there, but everybody saw him by that point. So, like, there are so many things that happen that when you as a reporter are there on the ground, you're not going to get from a Zoom call or from a source or from anything else. So what do we do with the Eagles moving forward? Because we know that Doug Peterson met with Jeffrey Lurie today. No news has come out yet, so who knows what that really means. The report came out that Carson Wentz is considering his future in Philadelphia after he blew off the media yesterday. He declined to have any conversation. So what do you think about the reports of Peterson and Wentz's relationship being fractured?
I don't necessarily buy that. I mean, I understand that Carson's frustrated and disappointed. I wouldn't be surprised if he wants out, although I would think the competitor in him wouldn't mind dueling it out with Jalen Hurts in training camp and the preseason to win that job. I mean, he's not coming across very well here. You kind of take it from his stance, supposed stance, that he doesn't want to compete. That, if he's not he wants to be appointed the starter right away, and if he doesn't get his way, he wants out of here, which is not a very good look for a starting quarterback. And but then you hear conflicting reports. Well, why? Well, according to Doug, the relationship is fine, and according to the AP, Wentz really wants to really wants to work things out with Doug. So I really don't know what to believe. I mean, the Eagles are not going to. The Eagles are certainly not going to cut him, and if they're trading him, they're not going to just give him away. They hold all the cards. I mean, Carson might want to trade, but wanting it and getting it are two different things. I mean, they're going to ask for a king's ransom for him, and rightfully so, the number 2 overall pick a couple of years ago. So, they're going to want a boatload of draft picks and maybe a couple of players as well. So, I'm not so sure that he's out of town right just yet.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Check out also his Extra Point columns over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Now, Miles Sanders spoke on another radio station earlier today and claimed that there were players who were not happy that Doug pulled Jalen Hurts and that guys weren't aware that this was a plan or an idea. And, first of all, and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, am I supposed to believe that Doug Peterson is the worst communicator in the history of the world and that nobody knew, but yet the people in Sunday Night Football knew from their production meeting?
Everybody knew that Nate Sudfeld was going to play. You're going to tell me that all the players on the team, when you go through practice during the week, the players who are going to play get the first team reps. You're going to tell me Nate Sudfeld didn't get a single rep with the first team all week, and then Doug all of a sudden to put him in there just cold with no preparation or anything? That's baloney. They knew full well that Nate was going to get some playing time. And granted, they probably didn't. They thought that maybe he would be earlier, and then when the Eagles were kind of hanging close, maybe they wishfully thought that Jalen would be the guy for the whole game. But to say that they didn't expect it, that's ridiculous.
So what do we do with this then? What do we do with these, I think the one report by Jeff McClain is exaggerated. I can't imagine a scenario where a player's, having to be held back from charging
Correct.
Doug Peterson over, a move at quarterback. I mean, I saw Greg Hardy on the sidelines trying to fight a coach in Dallas a few years ago. That's the first thing I thought of. So, what do we do with these reports out there and these players claiming that they weren't happy? Is that just guys blowing off steam?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just ludicrous to me. This was a meaningless game that meant nothing. So what? I don't get, or why wasn't Miles Sanders out there? And supposedly he was, I was physically unable to go. You're going to tell me that was a playoff game, or if there were playoff implications that you wouldn't have played, you would have been physically unable to play, right? No, you didn't play because it didn't mean anything. Just like some of the other guys who were on the sidelines. That's why Ben Roethlisberger didn't play, because his Steelers game didn't mean anything last week. Patrick Mahomes, the same thing. It happens every week in the NFL, especially in week 17. And I just don't understand. I don't get what the outrage is. First off, if this was a 1:00 game like it should have been, nobody would care because nobody would have watched it. But because it was prime time, now everybody has all their eyes on the Eagles.
Dave, Ron Jaworski put out a tweet earlier saying that the Eagles used 36 different players on offense this year, the most in the NFL, 39 different players on defense, the most in the NFL. So how much of what we saw this season with the Eagles was a byproduct of the injuries, and how much it was a byproduct of the poor play and the poor coaching?
I think it was a combination of everything, 50-50, really. Maybe a little more towards injuries. I mean, you can argue that, Carson Wentz certainly had a down year. Doug didn't have his best year in terms of play calling or going for fourth down, going for two, what have you. But the team was decimated by injuries, Josh. I mean, it was ridiculous. They had like 15 offensive line combinations in 16 games. You had guys who were working at Wawa playing cornerback for you. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And, granted, injuries aren't supposed to be an excuse, but when you're on your like fifth and sixth offensive tackles, your ninth and 10th corners, I mean, it's bound to catch up with you. And now granted, there were some games where they certainly were the better team and they just blew it, the opener being one of them. So yeah, you can't really make the excuse for every game that, the injuries were the cause of it. But I can't help but think that had a lot to do with it.
We know that Jeffrey Lurie usually speaks after every year, so I'm assuming we're going to hear from him, this week or next week, probably sooner than later, just because he wants to get out in front of things. What do you want to hear from the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles?
That's tough. I guess I just want to hear that he's as frustrated and disappointed with the team as the fans are. I want him to be a little bit angry. I want him to be a little upset about the way everything that transpired. I mean, I'm certainly not going to tell you any personnel changes that are forthcoming. But I just want him to acknowledge the fact that this is supposed to be an elite franchise. It's supposed to be the new norm, so to speak, from a couple of years ago. They were supposed to contend for playoffs every year. Maybe this is just a one-year aberration. I don't know, but I just want him to. I want to hear him express some disappointment the way the fans have been doing for the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, really.
Is there a move or a change or something that if you could put your finger on, and if you could say they got to do at least this off season, what would it be? Because it feels like this team has so many needs, and there's potentially so many changes that could come. I mean, from coaching, the roster. What if there was something you could maybe isolate? What would it be?
Boy, that's a tough one, Josh. You're putting me on the spot today. Well, defensive coordinator, obviously. That's the number one thing they got to take care of with Jim Schwartz. I'll be interested to see who they pick. I mean, there's a couple guys on the staff now that have defensive coordinator experience. I would love to see D'Amico Ryans get an opportunity here, at least get an interview. I mean, when he was with the Eagles, he always struck me as a very cerebral, intelligent football player who really knew the game and knew the ins and outs of everything, as a middle linebacker should. And I mean, he really impressed me during his tenure here. So, and I know I think he's a linebackers coach now with San Francisco. So, I would love to see him get a chance. Although I'm not sure they're going to do the due diligence and make a lot of conduct a lot of interviews. Secondly, I would get a quarterbacks coach that is not a yes man, that Carson is going to have to answer to, who's going to, or Jalen too. Someone's going to challenge them. Not always, agree with everything they have to say. Put your foot down when you have to. Yell when you have to. That would be another thing. Player wise, they got a lot of holes, Josh. I guess you got to start with. I'm not picking a wide receiver at number 6, though. I don't know if that's. I don't know if that's the wisest thing. I think you got to shore up the interior offensive line and defensive end as well. If there's a stud pass rusher or a stud guard out there, I think you got to go in that direction. But there's a lot of work to be done in the offseason. It's interesting to see how they handle it.
So let me rewind back to your first name with defense coordinator. What are your thoughts on Wade Phillips is out there advocating on Twitter that he might be an option to coach the Eagles? The guy is almost 80 years old.
Yeah. I guess I mean, it wouldn't hurt to talk to him. But like you said, being 80, I think I might want to. I mean, no disrespect to Wade; he's a outstanding defensive coordinator. But I think you're better off maybe going with some newer blood, so to speak, a guy who's brings some fresh ideas, some creativity, rather than a set system that he has to implement. So I mean, no disrespect to Wade again, but I think I'd go in a different direction than him.
By the way, bad job on me. I aged him a little bit too much. He's 73, turning 74. So I put out too many years on him. So
that's 82 in football years, so that's all right.
Okay, so now you mentioned D'Amico Ryans. I have heard people mention the possibility of them just promoting Matt Burke, who's currently on the staff. How would you feel about that?
Right. Not terrible. I mean, he's kind of a Jim Schwartz disciple. So there wouldn't be a whole lot of change. That I think they kind of believe in that system there. So you wouldn't have to drastically overhaul the personnel or the scheme. So I wouldn't be opposed to that. And Marquand, I think the same way. I think he was the defense coordinator maybe in Atlanta. So those guys have experience. They know what it takes to handle a defense. So I wouldn't be opposed to either one of those guys.
Now, to the draft pick, 6 overall, I've been advocating for this for the last couple of days, and I want to ask you your opinion on this. I think if I was the Eagles, I would pick Patrick Surtain II from Alabama, because I think that if you can get an elite cornerback type like him, who apparently every person who analyzes college football thinks he's the best cornerback prospect they've seen in a very long time. I just know that when I watch Alabama, nobody throws to his side of the field, and when they do, he seems to either intercept or deflect everything. So that's the guy that I would get with that pick, because to me, I can find, like you said, a receiver maybe a little bit later. I can maybe find an offensive lineman a little bit later. I don't know if I'll ever have a chance to get a cornerback like this again.
Yeah, you're right there. I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to Patrick Surtain. He's a stud, and I don't think they've drafted maybe a corner in the first round. So maybe Lito Shepherd. I'm not sure, but yeah, if you have a guy who's the consensus top corner, and there's no one else even close, if he's there at 6, you certainly. I think you do have to take him. You're right. You're right. I mean, you can shore up those other positions a little bit later on. I'm with you on that one.
All right, well, I got a convert over here. That's good. Good to know I can at least talk somebody into something, right?
There you go.
Dave, one more before I let you go with the Eagles, because it just feels like there's so many things to dissect with this team.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at the quarterback position, because I can't let you go without asking you this, did you see enough from Jalen Hurts to say he should be the guy next season? Or do you think there should be a quarterback competition between Wentz and Hurts? Or do you think the Eagles need to look elsewhere for their next quarterback?
Oh, that would certainly give people something to talk about. I don't think Jalen has shown enough. I was really impressed with his performance in the first 2 games, but he kind of, I don't want to say regressed, but kind of just hit the wall a little bit after that. Seems like defenses kind of figured him out. Plus, he didn't have the greatest supporting cast either, so it was tough to tell. And that's the case for Carson, for that matter, too. I have a hard time believing that Carson can't be fixed, but I'm also not willing to give him the job back right away. So I'd be in favor of that competition, and may the best quarterback win in training camp.
He's Dave Weinberg. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Check out all of his extra point columns at 973ESPN.com. Also, don't forget about his Tequilas and Touchdowns podcast with Dave Weinberg. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Dave, appreciate you jumping on a day early this week. And I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about this offseason with the Eagles. And by the way, baseball is about a month and change away from pitchers and catchers reporting?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, can't wait for baseball season.
I mean, at least you have some other sports to distract you, at least from this Eagles fiasco.
That's true. Yeah, boxing, same thing. Yeah, it's never a dull moment.
Well, yeah, hockey starts next week. The Sixers are 6-1. The NFL playoffs are this weekend. You got 2 triple headers, back-to-back days.
Yep, there you go.
Appreciate the time, Dave, as always.
All right, Josh, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Game Night being brought to you by weightliftinghq.com. Use my code radio10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Whatever your 2021 goals are for this year, health and fitness-wise, weightliftinghq.com can help you, whether it's bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, resistance bands, cardio and fitness machines, and more. They have everything you need at weightliftinghq.com. Whether you're someone who wants to supplement your gym routine and maybe get a couple extra workouts in a home, or maybe you're someone who's working from home and you just don't have the time between work and your family to get away from the house, you need a gym in your house, weightliftinghq.com can help anybody with what they need. Use the code Radio10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's Radio10 at checkout at weightliftinghq.com. Back to the text next, here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Final segment of the show here, 609-403-0973 is the text board to get in on the conversation, 609-403-0973. Want to remind all of you about my friends over at FanDuel. Every night we give you a pick for FanDuel each and every night. Of course, FanDuel is where New Jersey goes for all of their NFL, NBA, NHL starts up again next week, college basketball, whatever you want to get in on. They have all the action on FanDuel Sportsbook. And, of course, they have the great same-game parlays. So maybe you like a player over-under on points, whether you like a spread, whether you like an over-under on the game. You can parlay all those things together in one bet with FanDuel Sportsbook. That's one of the many exclusive offers you can get with FanDuel Sportsbook. So make sure you sign up for FanDuel Sportsbook with my promo code Hennig. That's promo code HENNIG to get in on all the action on FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, I mentioned to you guys I give you a pick each and every night. I'll give you the pick now before we get to the text board. So there's no Kevin Durant tonight, right? Kevin Durant, he's going to miss what is expected to be the next 4 games. So I was thinking about the game tonight, and I'm not crazy about the spread. It's a number that I personally would not get involved in. But the number I would get involved in, I mentioned this last night, has to do with Caris LeVert. So Caris LeVert is going to get a lot of playing time without Kevin Durant out there. So on FanDuel Sportsbook, you have the opportunity to get in on Caris LeVert. The over-under on his points, rebounds, and assists is 27.5. I say take that. Take that and run with it. Because you know that Caris LeVert is a stat sheet stuffer. Easy for me to say. So he's a guy that will go out there and get you some numbers. Now, the value there is not great. So you guys know that I'm very, very, very big on value. So here's my recommendation. Take the Caris LeVert over 27.5 on the points and the rebounds and the assists combined. Take that all together and parlay it with another NBA game tonight. What NBA game, you ask, is that? There's one game that I think could just be totally off the wall when it comes to scoring tonight. And that would be the Chicago Bulls and the Portland Trailblazers. These are two teams that score a lot of points. And I can foresee them going on that over. Now, if you take the over on the Bulls and the Blazers game and combine it with the Caris LeVert over 27.5, you're with plus 258 odds. You throw $10 on that, you can win almost $26 with FanDuel Sportsbook. Use the code Hennig to sign up. That's HENNIG, promo code HENNIG with FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be in New Jersey or Pennsylvania to participate with the code. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's get back to your text now, 609-403-0973 on the text board, 609-403-0973. Texter followed up about the questions about, the Eagles and what Doug Peterson was doing. And he says, I just believe if the Eagles win more games, taking the field goals, punting the ball in fourth, and then kicking a field goal. The defense played great this year, but how much harder did they have to work without being given good field position? They must have had at least several different field goals and punts all year. Well, Texter, first of all, I appreciate you texting. I appreciate your confidence in me knowing that stuff off the top of my head. I don't know exactly how much they could have had, but there's two problems with it. Number one, Jake Elliott also had a rough year. So it wasn't just Doug Peterson's play calling that was rough, Texter. It was Jake Elliott. What is going on with that guy? That's another thing we got to figure out moving forward. He missed some easy field goals this year. So you have to wonder, did Doug Peterson start calling on fourth downs because he didn't believe in his kicker? If that's the case, you need a new kicker ASAP. The second point I want to respond to that is, I don't know how many field goals and punts we could have had, but here's what I do know, Texter. If Carson Wentz doesn't throw some of those interceptions, you probably have 2 more wins this year. So instead of being 4-11-1, what if instead you're 6-9-1? 6-9-1 could have won the division. How sad is that? I mean, you would have beaten the Washington the first week to start with. So there's a lot of reasons why this team didn't win this year. And it was absolutely, utterly frustrating, to say the least. 609-403-0973. Mike from Marmora chimes in and says, Josh, I don't believe the hysteria of the integrity of the game. The NFL has been void of integrity for at least a decade, so putting them on a pedestal and blaming the Eagles is insane. I will say there was another example of poor recognition by the Eagles brass, including Doug, that the league is watching. It all come out in the wash, but these fans calling for Doug's job are just ridiculous. That's from Mike in Marmora. Well, Mike in Marmora, first of all, appreciate you texting in. Second of all, I agree with you about this integrity of the game stuff. I'm not buying into it either. The Steelers sat there, guys. People sit players all the time for injuries, for rest, for all kinds of things. So you're right. This idea that the Eagles violated the integrity of the game is ridiculous. And I also agree that, listen, this is all eventually going to come out. We're going to eventually find out exactly what's going on here. Because, like I said, there's a lot of information that we just don't know right now. I'm also not one of these people who wants to see Doug Peterson fired. Listen, if I got to choose between Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson, I'm giving Peterson 1 more year because it is so hard to find a championship-winning coach. It is one of the hardest things to do in all of sports, to win a championship. Here's an example of why, and I tweeted this out over the weekend. When you look at the Philadelphia Eagles and you look at their history, okay, they have 1 Super Bowl, just 1. Doug Peterson is one of 33 different head coaches to ever win a Super Bowl. There have been 63 different quarterbacks who have started in a Super Bowl. So almost double the number of quarterbacks have started in the big game than have head coaches won the big game. 19 current NFL head coaches have at least 1 playoff win. Only 8 have more postseason wins than Doug Peterson, who is 4-2 in his 6 games. That list of 8 who have more include John Gruden, who is 5-4, Sean Payton, who is 8-7, and Mike McCarthy, who is 10-8. So, Doug Peterson, compared to his contemporaries, his record is pretty good. He had 1 rough year. He had 1 year where you wanted to just, hit your head against the wall and just lose your mind. But I'm not ready to bail on Doug yet. And I hope the Eagles don't either, because I think that if Jeffrey Lurie genuinely believes in his head coach, and he genuinely believes in the people who the Eagles have hired to help make this organization better, then you keep the head coach. Because to me, it's harder to find a winning championship caliber head coach than it is a quarterback. Because I would argue that if more than half the quarterbacks swap places with Carson Wentz this year, the Eagles would have more wins. There were multiple games when Carson Wentz had an interception. He had a fumble. He took a sack. And it was unnecessary. They had the stat a couple of days ago on television that 30 of Wentz's sacks this year was when he held the ball for 4 seconds. You're supposed to get the ball out of your hands between 2 and 2.5 seconds. You know how many quarterbacks would love to have 4 seconds to throw a ball? They would be salivating over that. So arguably the offensive line actually performed better this year than we give them credit for. Find me a quarterback. I don't know if I can find a better head coach as of right now. It's a risk that I'm not willing to take just yet. If this replicates to next year with Doug Peterson, then I'm willing to move on. Because fool me once, fool me twice, you know the saying. Josh Hennig, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. I'll catch you tomorrow.